Hello and welcome to Cheers to Fears, where we take horror films and turn them into drinking games. We're your two hosts. I'm Alex.
And I'm Tucker. Today we will be making a drinking game for Paranormal Activity, The Marked Ones, the fifth movie in the franchise. From Paranormal Activity 2 to Paranormal Activity 5, Christopher Landon has been the writer. But in this movie, he takes the credit for both writer and director.
In The Marked Ones, Jesse just graduated from high school. Him and his friend Hector start to observe an odd person in the neighborhood named Anna until she is found murdered by Jesse's friend from high school, Oscar. When Jesse runs into Oscar again, he talks about how they have both been marked by Anna. Within the following days, Jesse starts to notice that he has superhuman strength and even shows off a bit to Hector. Soon after Jesse finds his newfound strength, he starts to struggle with his anger and starts showing signs that he may not be himself anymore.
For this movie, you do not need a lot of context from the other Paranormal Activity movies, even though many characters from the other movies do make cameos here and there. Regardless, if you have not yet seen this film, there is a spoiler warning in effect, so we recommend that if you have not yet seen it, to take our drinking rules currently posted on screen, go watch the movie, and come back when it's over. Now, on to the rest of the video.
So on to the drinking rules, and as always, we start off with death. And for this movie, it came to a total of 8 sips.
Yeah, and that's more than the first 3 entries put together.
Yeah, even if you include the 4th, it's 1 more if we include the 4th. For all 4 of those movies, it's one more sip.
Yeah, the first 4 has 9, this one has 8. So like, the fact that there's that many more deaths in this one, it says something. It's finally a different movie.
Yeah.
Anyways, moving on to our second rule for this drinking game. It's again screams, cries, and yells. If you hear one of those, you take a sip. This time around, it happened 22 times. And as per usual, there's not much else to say other than it aligns with our next rule.
Speaking of which, the next rule is jump scares. Whenever you see one, you take a sip, and this came to a total of 16.
And yeah, there was a lot more effective jump scares in this one versus at least the 4th one. One notably that comes to mind is when they're in Anna's basement of her house, I guess, and like there's that sheet of plastic and then the jump scare happens there. But aside from that, there was still a lot more jump scares in like the first 3, or I mean like it had more to offer in the first 3 Paranormal Activities for sure.
Yeah, I'd definitely say so.
But I'm glad they started to kind of bring them back and at least get a little more unique with them, unlike the 4th one.
Unlike the 4th one.
Yeah.
This is definitely a change of pace.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's move on to rule number 4. It's whenever paranormal activity occurs. This time around, it happened 8 times.
Yeah, and generally it's up to, I'd say, kind of in around the high teens, like 18 or so, give or take.
Yeah.
And I feel like the main reason for that is because the demon's trying to possess a person as opposed to, like, actually doing spooky things like moving a towel. That's a weird example, but I guess you can see.
I also feel like it's because, like, you know, they're not recording in their house overnight all the time. There's always people around when they're recording.
Yeah.
So like obviously there's an entity typically doesn't haunt people when there's a bunch of other people around. So that probably plays a role as well.
Moving on to the next rule is whenever the camera is mentioned, you take a sip, and that came to a total of 12.
Yeah, and again, not much to say for this rule. It's been in every drinking game so far in the franchise, so probably going to be continued to be used, honestly, throughout the whole franchise. I guess we'll see.
And this camera's nice. See? How much is it?
Anyways, we'll move on to rule number 6. It's whenever Crazy Anna is talked about, and this happened 14 times in the movie.
That's Crazy Anna's apartment. She lives right under me.
And I guess Anna played a much bigger role. I'm not even sure if in the franchise, but definitely in this movie than we figured. We thought it could have just been some random lady killed, but I guess she was in charge of getting all the, what would you call them? Males possessed to youth?
Yeah. She was the reason for the marked ones, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But we also learned that she was in cahoots with Grandma Lois from the 3rd one, right?
Yeah.
So like she was part of the coven that Grandma Lois was a part of. So, I mean, it ties it in that way. And I guess you could say she had a bigger role in the whole franchise because of this movie. And she's, you know, intertwined with that whole scene. So she does have a role at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, I honestly didn't expect much to come from Anna. I thought it was just like a setup to like get inside Anna's house, I didn't think she was actually going to have that big of a part.
Yeah. Next up is rule number 7, which is whenever you see the symbol with the triangle and a circle in it, you take a sip, which came to a total of 11.
Yeah, I don't know what this symbol's called. Maybe
either.
you guys can tell us in the comments, but we've seen it a little bit in the previous installment, but this time around it happened enough to make a rule out of it. So
it was Mercy and I think one scene as well.
Yeah, it was definitely worth mentioning in this installment, I guess.
I think we were thinking of adding it into some of the previous films, like 3 or 4, but then I don't think it was enough compared to some of the other rules, so we just decided to add it for this one finally.
Yeah, exactly. Moving on to rule number 8, it's another rule involving Anna. It's whenever somebody enters her house, and it happens 6 times in the movie.
We should also note that her house is currently an active crime scene.
Yep, and
they touch a lot of things in the house, by the way, so their fingerprints are everywhere.
Yeah, well, exactly.
And that actually leads us into our next rule, which is whenever somebody is doing something illegal, you take a sip. And this came to a total of 18 sips.
Yeah, and it kind of goes along with some of the other rules, such as like death, because Oscar kills Anna, so that's illegal. So there's a couple instances where it does double up, but there's also times where it is just standalone rule as well. So like when they're doing the voyeurism stuff, that's kind of, it does double up with Anna being mentioned, but I don't know. There's a lot of times, and another example is, I think at the time for sure, it was illegal to smoke weed, and they were doing that in the movie, so we counted that as well.
Yeah,
so.
It was also illegal to shoot people, and they did that in the end of the movie, while trespassing on somebody's property, might I add.
Yeah. So moving right along to the last rule of this drinking game, it's whenever something supernatural happens to somebody's body. So for example, like if you see the bite marks, eyes changing looks, like, their eyes look, getting super strength, stuff like that is what you're looking for. And it happened 13 times based on our count.
Yeah, and that does it for the total number of sips for this drinking game. The total number comes to 128, and that is equivalent to drinking 4.5 drinks based off our 30 sip per can scale, and that is obviously for every 12 ounce can you drink.
So yeah, in terms of drinking for this movie, like, we did mention how there was more deaths in this one compared to any other Paranormal Activity movie, so that was a change of pace for the drinking game at least. Overall, it was, I think, the most drinks we've had in any Paranormal Activity so far.
Yes, it was. And in saying that, not only was the drinking different, but I guess the overall tone of the movie was unique as well.
Finally.
Yeah.
Fuck, I was so happy to finally have something new from a Paranormal Activity movie and not just the same movie.
Yeah, it's not just like a cheap text on screen saying night number 1 anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't have that trend.
Yeah.
And even though they did it's completely different movie, completely changed the tone, they still did pay tribute and kind of tie it into the previous installments as well. Like, for example, we mentioned how Crazy Anna was linked up with Grandma Lois, for sure. We already mentioned that. But like, even in the end with like, I think it was Hector that ended up in Katie's and Mika's house from the first one.
Yeah.
And we get to kind of see a different perspective where Katie yells for Mika, he runs downstairs, and then he dies. We get to see it from a different perspective this time around, and I thought that was neat how they tied it in that way.
They mentioned scenes from the 3 first good movies. They, I think, forgot about the 4th for the most part.
I think they just kind of retconned it and didn't include it.
They just didn't want any mention of it. They want it scrubbed clean from this movie. I know we mentioned Katie and Christy as kids. We also get an appearance from Allie from the second movie, who is the stepdaughter of Christy. And it was just kind of weird to see that she didn't really play a role or die or anything like that in that movie, so it was interesting to see that she came back.
I think it was just like it was something to pay tribute to the other ones at least, and like have a tie-in in some way, because they didn't do it a lot. They didn't tie it in that much, but they did want to do something to at least make it a Paranormal Activity movie, I think.
Yeah, then they did, I'd say, a fair job of that, since they brought back a lot of things from past movies.
Yeah, exactly.
As for the characters in this movie, Hector and Jesse were fine, but honestly I don't think they were really any improvement over the characters in 1, 2, or 3, just myself personally. If anything, maybe an improvement over 2, but definitely not 3 in my opinion.
Yeah, to me, I kind of like them. Like, I do agree, I like the characters in 1, 2 and 3 more as well. Not 4 though, for sure.
Yeah.
Hector and Jesse were better characters. They at least had some backstory involved, and like, you know, they had their own characteristics that made them stand out as different people. They weren't all just the same. But one character that I felt didn't really stand out, she was just kind of there, was Penelope. And like, whether she was there or not, I feel like the movie could have been the same with or without
It wouldn't
her.
have changed, I feel.
Like, I didn't hate her or anything. It's just she was one of the characters kind of that we get from Paranormal Activity 4. She was just there, kind of.
Yeah. I do like the dynamic between Hector and Jesse, though, just for the main part that it's just teenagers being teenagers, like doing stupid things, like going down the stairs in a laundry basket, or just spying to see some boobies, even though that's pretty much illegal if they were to get caught.
Definitely illegal. But yeah, I do agree that I liked their dynamic, and it kind of felt like genuine, you know, high schoolers being just typical teens type of thing. I know they just graduated, but still, they're still that age that they like to, you know, mess around and get into trouble.
Be mature.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they pulled that off pretty well in this movie.
Yeah.
But one of the other characters that did kind of stand out for me was the grandma. I forget her name, but she was kind of a fun character. She, at times, she kind of let her, you know, inner child out and was like, you know, taking shots with the kids and stuff
And
too.
dancing,
Dancing. And she just overall felt like a fun grandma, you know? And I liked her character. She was serious when she needed to be, so she took control when she needed to, but she also knew how to loosen up, I guess.
Yeah, and I should say this now, that it's a good change of pace, as opposed to the cast just basically being pure white people from this point. It was a very good cast of Hispanic people for the most part. I enjoyed a good chunk of them, especially Hector and Jesse for the most part.
Oh yeah. It was, I agree that it was nice that they, you know, got away from just a completely whitewashed Paranormal Activity.
Yeah, definitely.
And took a different culture into this one, and I liked seeing that different culture in this one.
Yeah. The one thing I feel like they were missing from this movie is if they dove into the mother a little bit more, I would have liked that. Jesse's mother, anyways, who died. Yeah. They just kind of leave it at she died at his birth, which I feel like they could have done a lot more, such as him having difficulties being raised, or even him being in high school and graduating, how it was difficult with him being basically only raised by a father. I wish the father was in more scenes too, to kind of say how living as a single parent was for him as well. I feel like it would have added a little bit more to that.
Yeah, he was a very minor character that we only saw in a handful of scenes. And another point that I think they kind of, I don't know, they messed up on, I guess you would say. It was a little bit confusing that they were starting to take over people at the age of 18. When we kind of see like kids being affected in previous ones. Like obviously it happened with Hunter in the second one, and the third one, Katie and Christy, kids being affected by this the whole time. It was clearly affecting kids before they were 18.
Yeah, and they just randomly decided to change it.
And of course in this movie they had to continue with the gimmicks. So in this movie they used the Simon Says game as the gimmick, and at least this time around, I kind of enjoyed the gimmick in this one. It wasn't an Xbox Connect, but it was at least better than that.
It wasn't like over the top. This one's a lot more subtle, to say the least. It's not like, oh, dots everywhere, you can see the ghost now.
Yeah.
Which I know what happens in the sixth one. I'm not excited to see that. But anyways, I feel like this one's subtle enough. It doesn't do it too much. It's just yes or no questions, and it's very vague.
Yeah, and they're doing what typical teenagers would do, and like kind of getting freaked out by it, but also wanting to just keep going with it because it clearly is freaky and they like being scared. So it felt at least kind of realistic or plausible.
So what are your overall thoughts on the movie?
I liked this movie quite a bit, and I'm not sure if it's because I watched it immediately after watching Paranormal Activity 4, but I'm just happy that it's a change of pace. Like, it didn't try to copy another movie in the franchise. It did its own thing while still paying tribute and tying into the previous movies in the franchise. It did what a sequel should try and do, and, you know, push the story forward while also, you know, doing something different.
Yeah, and that's the main thing about this movie, is it was different. I wouldn't call it great by any means, honestly, myself. but I'd say it's a lot more rewatchable than I feel like a lot of them, just for the fact that it is a different movie.
Yeah, but one thing that didn't change in this Paranormal Activity movie is the decisions that were made. Which leads us right into the awards ceremony, where we award one not-so-lucky nominee the Darwin Award. This award goes to the character who made a stupid decision that resulted in them getting killed, somebody else getting killed, or simply resulting in something bad happening that could have easily been avoided. This award can also be given to a character who's just plain dumb. Here are the nominees.
Today's first nominee is Hector for making various small mental errors, including thinking he can levitate since Jesse can, going down the stairs in a laundry basket, entering an active crime scene, withholding information from the police about a murder, participating in voyeurism, telling Jesse to leave his bike when taking it would have been legitimately quicker to get away, and wanting to close a trapdoor behind them. That was a mouthful.
Next up is Oscar's brother Arturo for going into somebody else's property and shooting them. I'm pretty sure that would get you sent to jail in any state.
And the winner is Hector. Yes, Arturo was going around blasting people, but he did it to try to save Jesse. Hector had just too many bad decisions to pass up giving him the award today.
And with all that being said, we hope you enjoyed our look into Paranormal Activity, the marked ones. If you end up playing the game alongside the movie, or if you have any feedback or suggestions, let us know in the comments below. Also let us know in the comments if you like the changes from the typical formula used in Paranormal Activity movies.
Make sure to like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on tomorrow's episode, where we are going to be making a drinking game for the 6th installment in the Paranormal Activity franchise, Paranormal Activity, The Ghost Dimension. If you want to check out our most recent video on Paranormal Activity 4, click on the box on the top right, or if you want to see a playlist of all the drinking games and movies we review, click on the box below it. Thanks for tuning in, and this is us saying,
Cheers to fears.